I reclaimed my daughter's college fund after she decided to cut ties with me. Here's the situation. I'm a 45-year-old single mom with two kids, Ella, 18, and Jake, 16. Life hasn't been easy for us, especially after my husband passed away when the kids were too young to fully grasp what was happening. For the past 12 years, it's been just me, keeping everything together. It's worth mentioning that when my husband died, he left a life insurance policy behind. It was his way of making sure we'd be okay. And while I'm grateful for it, money doesn't last forever, and expenses don't stop just because you have some savings. I had to be smart about how I managed it. My first priority was to cover the basics: mortgage payments, groceries, utilities, the usual. But what really kept me up at night was ensuring my kids wouldn't face financial struggles in the future, especially considering how pricey college is these days. Ella had always been passionate about academics, so I knew college was in her plans. Early on, I decided to set aside a portion of the life insurance money for a college fund for both Ella and Jake. My goal was clear: I didn't want them buried in debt when they finished school. That college fund became the focus of my financial planning. We didn't live lavishly, no fancy vacations or big purchases, and I hardly spent on myself. It wasn't a miserable life by any means. I just had my priorities straight. It was all about ensuring my kids had a secure future. From a young age, Ella always dreamed of getting into one of those elite colleges, the kind you see in movies, with picturesque campuses and students who seem to have it all together. She was obsessed with the idea, and I couldn't have been prouder. I wanted her to have that experience, to be somewhere that would open doors and provide opportunities I never had. Over the years, we had countless talks about college and the value of education. She knew how much I was sacrificing, and I made it clear that the money I was saving was strictly for her and Jake's education. I didn't want any misunderstandings that college fund was off limits for anything else. Of course, our relationship wasn't perfect, what mother-daughter dynamic is. Ella's a teenager, and that naturally comes with its fair share of drama. But overall, we got along well, and I always thought we had a close connection. Sure, we argued occasionally, like any family, but it never felt like it would tear us apart. Looking back, though, I should have paid more attention to the small changes. It's easy to miss things when you're caught up in the daily grind, working, managing the house, and just keeping life moving. But now, I can see some red flags I should have noticed sooner. During her last year of high school, Ella started hanging out with a new group of friends, not wild or anything, just different from her usual crowd. At first, I didn't think much of it. Kids grow, their interests change. But I noticed she was pulling away from me. We didn't have those long heart-to-heart talks anymore, those moments where she'd sit in the kitchen and share her thoughts or plans with me. They just stopped happening. And then there was her attitude. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining about typical teenage behavior, because I get it, teens can be moody. But Ella's words started to cut deep. She'd snap at me over simple requests, like cleaning her room or helping with dinner, accusing me of smothering her or treating her like a child. It hurt, but I chalked it up to a phase she'd grow out of. After all, don't we all go through those stages? Still, it was hard not to notice that she was drifting further away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just teenage rebellion. It felt like there was something deeper going on that she wasn't sharing. Then she started dating Matt, and that's when everything really shifted. I'd met him a few times, and he seemed decent, polite, didn't seem like trouble. But once they got more serious, Ella changed. She wasn't just distant anymore, she was downright cold. She'd either ignore me or snap over the smallest things. It felt like no matter what I did, it was always wrong. Whenever I brought up college or her future, she'd shut down the conversation, saying I was stressing her out. It was so unlike her. I felt like I didn't know my own daughter anymore. I wanted to ask her if something was wrong or if there was an issue between her and Matt, but I was afraid I'd push her even further away. It's a delicate balance. When your child is growing up, you want to be involved, but you don't want to overstep. To be honest, I didn't want to admit that things were getting this bad. I thought we were just in a rough patch that would eventually pass. But deep down, I was worried. The more distant she became, the more I started to doubt myself. Had I missed something crucial along the way? Had I made mistakes that drove her away? All the while, that college fund sat untouched, waiting for her. I never imagined that the very thing I worked so hard to save for her would become a source of tension between us. It's strange how life throws you curveballs when you least expect them, just when you think you've got everything under control. And that turning point came when Ella started seeing Matt. I'll admit, initially I didn't think much of Matt. He seemed like a typical guy, a bit older than Ella, but nothing that raised alarms. I met him a few times when he came over for dinner or just hung out at our place. He was polite, said the right things, and I figured if Ella liked him, he must be a good person. I mean, she's smart, right? She's always had good judgment, so I trusted her decision. But, man, after just a few weeks of dating, everything shifted. At first, it was subtle. She started staying out later than usual, and when I'd ask where she was going, she'd either brush me off or give me an irritated look, as if I was being unreasonable for even asking. I get it, she's 18, almost an adult, but I don't think it's unreasonable to want to know where your kid is. It wasn't just the late nights, though. Her whole demeanor changed. She became withdrawn, like she didn't want to talk to me anymore. Before Matt entered her life, we'd have these chats in the kitchen about school, her future, and just everyday stuff. But those moments became less frequent, and when I tried to bring them up, she'd get defensive, saying things like, "Mom, you're suffocating me, or you treat me like I'm still a child." That one stung because I thought I was giving her enough space. One evening, we had a small disagreement over something trivial, maybe asking her to help with the dishes, and she exploded. She accused me of always being on her back, never letting her do anything, and trying to control her life. It hurt because all I'd ever wanted was to ensure she had a bright future. That's when I really began to worry about Matt. I wasn't sure if he was influencing her thoughts or if she was just changing because of him, but it felt like her entire personality was shifting the longer they were together. This wasn't the Ella I knew, the daughter I had raised, and I had no idea how to reach her because every attempt turned into a fight. And it wasn't just me who noticed the change. Even Jake, my usually quiet son, approached me one day and asked, "Mom, what's going on with Ella? She's always so mad now." That broke my heart. If Jake, who rarely speaks up, could see the difference, I knew I wasn't just imagining things, something was definitely wrong. The more time Ella spent with Matt, the worse things became at home. She'd disappear for entire weekends and barely reply when I'd check in. Every time I tried to address it, it always ended the same way, her accusing me of being too controlling or treating her like a child. I felt stuck. I didn't want to push her further away, but I also couldn't sit back and watch her slip out of my life. I started questioning if Matt was really the root of the problem, or if it was just part of Ella growing up and me struggling to let go. You know, those late night thoughts that creep in when you're lying awake, trying to make sense of everything. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just normal teenage growing pains. This was different. There was a tension between us that hadn't been there before. I even tried to make an effort with Matt, hoping that building a better relationship with him might improve things with Ella. I invited him over for dinner a few more times, tried to get him involved in conversations, but he always seemed distant. He answered my questions, but it never felt like he was trying to connect with me or with Jake. It was clear he was there for Ella, not to build any relationship with her family. And honestly, the more I saw them together, the more uncomfortable I became about their relationship. There was this subtle but undeniable influence he seemed to have over her. It wasn't just Ella's attitude toward me that had changed, she also stopped caring about her future. All those dreams she had of going to a prestigious college, of earning a degree, suddenly seemed unimportant to her. Whenever I brought it up, she'd roll her eyes and say things like, "I'll figure it out, Mom," or "Stop stressing me out about it." I started feeling like I was the only one still invested in her future, and that terrified me. College had always been the plan. We'd talked about it for years. How could she suddenly not care anymore? One evening, I decided to have a serious conversation with her. I didn't want to argue, I just wanted to understand what was going through her mind. I asked her about her plans, about Matt, and why she'd been so distant. And the way she looked at me, it was like I was a stranger to her. She didn't say much, just kept insisting I was overreacting, that everything was fine, and that I needed to stop worrying so much. But I couldn't just stop worrying. How could I? This was my daughter, the same girl who used to dream out loud about her goals, and now it seemed like she didn't care at all. I couldn't just sit back and watch her give up on everything we'd worked towards without at least trying to help. So I asked her directly if Matt was influencing her, if he was the reason she was pulling away from me and abandoning her plans. That's when she completely lost it. I'd never seen her so furious before. She accused me of not trusting her, of trying to control her life and her relationship. She insisted that Matt had nothing to do with it, that it was all my fault, that I was the problem. I didn't know how to respond to that. It's one thing to have your child be upset with you, but it's another to hear them say you're the reason everything is falling apart. I felt like I was losing her, and no matter what I tried, it only pushed her further away. At that point, I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But I had no idea how to fix it, and I didn't know how to reach Ella anymore. It felt like the harder I tried, the worse things got, and Matt was always lurking in the background, observing everything unfold. I couldn't shake the suspicion that he played a bigger role in all this than Ella was letting on, but how do you say that without driving your own child away for good? It was like I was tiptoeing through a minefield every time I tried to speak with her, terrified that one wrong word would cause everything to crumble even more. The breaking point came during what I thought would be just another typical argument. Lately, those arguments had become more frequent, with Ella constantly challenging everything I said. And I get it, she's 18, nearly an adult, seeking her independence. But the way she'd been behaving, it felt like I didn't recognize her anymore. I knew there was tension between us, but I never saw what happened next coming. It began over something small, like most of our recent arguments. I think I asked if she had thought about her college applications, and that seemed to set her off. She snapped, telling me to stop stressing her out and insisting she had it all under control. I remember feeling my frustration rise because, honestly, nothing seemed under control. She wasn't discussing college like she used to. She wasn't talking to me at all, really. So I pressed a bit harder, probably more than I should have, and that's when it happened. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm done with you, Mom. When I leave for college, I'm going no contact. I don't need you anymore." That moment is burned into my memory. It felt like my heart stopped, like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't even respond right away. I was so stunned. After everything I'd done for her, everything I'd given up, this was how she felt. That she could just cut me out of her life the moment she could leave. I must have looked shocked because she kept going. "You've been controlling my whole life," she said. "Once I'm gone, I'm not coming back. I don't want anything to do with you." That's when I lost it. All those years of holding back, trying to be the best mother I could be, making sacrifices, working late nights, it all came rushing out. I started listing everything I had done for her, how I'd given up so much to make sure she and Jake had a good life. I reminded her about the college fund, how I had saved every extra penny from her dad's life insurance so she could attend a great school without being buried in debt. But she just stood there, arms crossed, with this look on her face that said she didn't care, like none of it meant anything. And honestly, that hurt more than all her words. It was like she had shut off her emotions completely, and I couldn't reach her. She finally responded, "I didn't ask you to do that. You keep throwing it in my face like I owe you something. I don't." I never asked for any of it. Hearing that felt like a slap. It made me realize just how much distance had grown between us. I thought we were on the same page, that she understood how much I was doing for her future, but clearly I was wrong. She saw me as nothing more than a controlling parent who was suffocating her with expectations. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my emotions boiling over. "Ella, I've done everything I could to give you the life you wanted," I said. "And this is how you repay me, by saying you're cutting me out of your life the moment you don't need me anymore. That's not fair." She didn't even flinch. "I'm not a little girl anymore, Mom," she shot back. "I don't need you. I'll be fine on my own." It was then that I realized nothing I said would make a difference. Ella's mind was made up, and there was nothing I could do or say to change that. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was devastated. I had spent 18 years building a life for her and Jake, making sure they had everything they needed, and now she was telling me none of it mattered. It wasn't just about the money or the sacrifices, it was the fact that she was willing to walk away from me entirely, like I was just some obstacle in her path. She didn't even consider how much it would hurt me, or how much it would hurt her brother to lose her. It was all about her, and I couldn't understand it. After a long, heavy silence, I asked her, "So, what about Jake? Are you going no contact with him too, or is it just me you're done with?" She rolled her eyes, like it was a ridiculous question. "Of course not," she said. "I'll still talk to Jake. But you, I need space from you, Mom. I need to live my own life." I couldn't believe it. She was ready to shut me out entirely, but would still keep in touch with Jake. It made no sense to me. I had been there for both of them since day one, and now she treated me like the enemy, like a barrier she had to get past. I realized I needed to step away before things got worse. So I just said, if that's what you really want, Ella, then I can't stop you. But think carefully about what you're saying before making decisions you can't take back. She shrugged and walked away like it was nothing, like she hadn't just dropped a bomb on me. I stood there in the kitchen, staring after her, feeling like my whole world had been turned upside down. How had it come to this? How did my relationship with my own daughter reach a point where she wanted to cut me out of her life? I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. Had I been too controlling? Had I smothered her without realizing it? Or was this Matt's influence making her see me as the villain? The next few days were filled with awkward silence. Ella barely spoke to me, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us. There was this tension in the house, and every time I saw her, that knot tightened in my stomach. I wanted to reach out to her, to find a way to fix things, but I had no idea where to begin. It was like there was a wall between us, and I had no clue how to tear it down. Jake noticed something was wrong, too. He asked me once, "Mom, is everything okay with Ella?" And I just told him it was fine because I didn't want to drag him into it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't fine, not at all. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. After Ella dropped the whole no-contact bomb on me, I spent the next few days feeling completely lost. I had no idea how to handle it. I mean, what do you do when your own child says they don't want you in their life anymore? There's no handbook for that kind of pain. I kept replaying our argument, wondering if I had missed something. Maybe I had been too demanding, maybe I pushed her too much, but I couldn't see how wanting the best for her made me the villain. The house was painfully quiet. Ella and I barely exchanged words, and when we did, they were brief, loaded with eye rolls. The tension was so thick you could almost cut through it. Jake sensed the change, but he kept to himself, like he didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. Smart kid. Then came the night when everything truly blew up. I hadn't planned on confronting Ella again so soon after our last fight, but sometimes things happen when you're least prepared. She came home late once more, and I asked where she'd been. I didn't mean to provoke anything, I was genuinely curious. But, as usual, it quickly escalated. She snapped back. "Why do you always need to know where I am? I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. Stop treating me like one." Looking back, I probably should have let it go, but it was late, I was exhausted, and I was tired of tiptoeing around her like I had been recently. So I snapped back, "Because I'm still your mother, Ella, and I care about you." Is that such a bad thing? That's when everything came pouring out. Her face filled with frustration, and she said, "You're not caring, you're controlling. You've controlled me my entire life. It's always been about what you want for me, never about what I want." Those words hit me like a punch. I'd always believed I was doing what was best for her, giving her stability, ensuring she had the tools to succeed. But hearing her say that, it felt like she saw all my efforts as some kind of chain, holding her down instead of helping her rise. I was at a loss, caught between wanting to defend myself and not wanting to push her away even more. "You act like I haven't given up so much for you and Jake," I said, my voice trembling. "Everything I've done has been for you. I've worked my whole life to make sure you didn't have to struggle. I saved that college fund so you could attend the school of your dreams, Ella. And now you're saying it doesn't matter." "Exactly," she shot back. "You did all that, but I never asked you to. You keep using the college fund like it's some kind of bargaining chip to control me. I never wanted to be in debt to you like that." In debt, I could hardly process what I was hearing. "This isn't about debt. It's about giving you a chance to succeed without drowning in loans. How could you think that?" Ella shook her head, crossing her arms tightly as if trying to keep herself from breaking. "You don't get it, do you? You've made it all about you, the money, the plans, everything. I never had a say in anything, and now you're surprised that I don't want to be part of it anymore." That's when I realized just how differently we viewed things. To me, everything I'd done had come from a place of love, a desire to protect her and provide the opportunities I never had. But to her, it was control. Each sacrifice I made, every extra hour I worked, it wasn't seen as love, but as a restriction. As painful as it was to hear, I had to confront the fact that somewhere along the way, we'd stopped seeing eye to eye. "Ella, all I ever wanted was for you to have the life you dreamed of," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How did it come to this? Why do you see me as the enemy?" She let out a deep, exasperated sigh. Because you never listen to me. Whenever I try to make my own decisions, you're right there, telling me what I should do, what's best for me. You never even ask what I want. I was at a loss for words, feeling like I was sinking into quicksand, and every attempt to speak only pulled me deeper. Maybe she was right, maybe I hadn't been listening as much as I thought I had. I'd always assumed I knew what was best because I was her mom and I'd lived through similar struggles. I thought my role was to guide her, to keep her on track. But maybe I had been holding on too tightly without even knowing it. So what do you want then, Ella? I asked, feeling a knot form in my throat. If you could have it your way, what would that look like? Her response came immediately, like she'd been waiting for the chance to say it. I just want to live my own life without you hovering over me. I want to make my own choices, even if they're mistakes. And I don't want you holding the college fund over my head like it's some prize for being the daughter you expect me to be. It hit me then that, in her eyes, the college fund wasn't a gift, it was a burden, something she felt she had to earn instead of something I had provided out of love. And that realization crushed me. I never meant for it to feel that way, I said quietly. The college fund, everything I've done, it was never about control. It's because I love you and I wanted you to have a good life. I know you love me, Mom, she said, her tone softening a bit. But I need you to let go. I need to live my life for me, not for you. A long silence followed. I didn't know how to respond. I felt like I was at a crossroads, knowing that no matter which direction I chose, I was going to lose something important. If I let her go, if I stopped pushing her toward the future I dreamed of for her, would I be failing her? But if I kept holding on, I'd only drive her further away. It was a no-win situation. I don't want to lose you, I finally said, my voice breaking. But I don't know how to just let go. Ella sighed, her arms falling to her sides. You won't lose me, Mom, but I need space. And I need you to trust me. I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure I could trust her judgment. How could I, when every instinct told me she was making the wrong choices? But maybe that was the point. Maybe she needed the freedom to make her own mistakes, and maybe I had to learn how to step back, even though it terrified me. That night, after Ella went to bed, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, thinking about everything. About how hard I had tried to give her the best life possible, and how those efforts had somehow become a source of tension between us. I began to understand that maybe loving someone means letting them find their own path, even when you don't agree with the direction they're taking. But one thing was certain, I wasn't ready to give up on her. Not yet. So after that difficult talk with Ella, I spent a lot of time reflecting on what she had said about me holding on too tightly, about how she felt like I wasn't giving her any control over her own life. It was tough to hear, but deep down, I knew there was some truth to her words. I've always been the kind of mom who stays involved in every detail, making sure everything is on track, making sure my kids stay on the right path. I never saw it as being overbearing, I just wanted to help her avoid the mistakes I made when I was her age. But after that conversation, I had to face reality. Ella didn't want my help anymore. She didn't want my guidance. She wanted space, freedom, and the chance to do things her own way. And honestly, that terrified me. I had spent years saving up that college fund for her, setting aside money from her dad's life insurance, working extra shifts so she could attend a good school without the burden of debt. But now she was telling me that none of it mattered to her. That she didn't care about the fund, only about breaking free from me and living life on her terms. So I had to ask myself, what's the point of holding onto that college fund if she didn't even want my help? If she didn't want to be a part of my life, why should I be the one to ensure she had everything she needed for her future? I tried to avoid making a decision, but the more I dwelled on it, the more it gnawed at me. I couldn't stop replaying her words about going no contact, about leaving and never looking back. It felt like a gut punch every time I thought about it, and each time, my frustration grew. I didn't want to be vengeful or petty, but I also couldn't be a doormat. I had put in so much effort to give her everything, and now she was saying she didn't even want me in her life. It didn't sit right with me. If she was serious about cutting ties, why should I be obligated to fund her future? One evening, after another day filled with awkward silence, I decided it was time to have a serious conversation. I needed to be upfront about my feelings. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about respect. It was about her understanding that I wasn't just an ATM she could use until she didn't need me anymore. So I knocked on her door and asked if we could talk. She sighed, clearly not wanting to, but let me in anyway. I started, keeping my voice steady. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night, about wanting to live your own life and not wanting me so involved. Ella didn't say a word, just kept her gaze on the floor, arms crossed. I took that as a sign to continue. I understand that you're ready for independence, and I'm trying to respect that, I told her. But I need you to see things from my side too. I've worked hard to ensure you had a future without financial worries, without the struggles I faced. And now, you're saying you don't want me in your life, that you're going no contact. She finally looked up, her expression hardening. I didn't mean it like that, Mom. I just need space. You're twisting it to make it sound like I'm abandoning you. That's how it feels, I admitted, my voice breaking a little. It feels like you're saying you don't need me anymore. And that hurts, Ella. It really does. She stayed silent, but she wasn't dismissing me, so I pressed on. If you don't want me in your life, if you're serious about needing space and cutting me off after you leave for college, then I can't keep the college fund for you anymore. Her expression shifted immediately. What do you mean? I mean that if you're planning to cut me out, I'm not going to be the one funding your way, I explained, trying to stay firm but not unkind. That money was meant to help you get a great education, but it was also a part of our relationship. I saved that money because I love you and wanted to give you a good start. But if you're going to cut ties, I can't keep sacrificing for someone who doesn't want me around. Her mouth fell open a bit, clearly not expecting this. You're really going to take the money away just because I said I need space. It's not about the space, I corrected. It's about the fact that you're saying I won't be part of your life. If you want to be independent, then be independent. But that means you can't expect me to pay for everything and then walk away when it suits you. She stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. So this is your way of punishing me for wanting my freedom? You're taking the money back to control me, just like I said. I shook my head. That's not what this is, Ella. I'm not trying to control you, I'm trying to protect myself. I've given you everything, and now you're saying you don't want me in your life. I can't keep giving if I'm not going to be part of your future. She was furious. You're selfish. You're only doing this because I'm not living up to your expectations. I thought you saved that money because you loved me, but I guess it was just a way to keep me under your thumb. I had no idea how to respond to that. I had tried to be patient to make her understand my perspective, but she wasn't hearing it. To her, it was all about control, and nothing I said seemed to change her mind. I'm sorry you see it that way, I replied quietly. But my decision is final. If you're serious about going no contact, then I'm taking back the college fund. I'll divide it between Jake's education and what I need for myself. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a while, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't what I wanted. I never wanted to be at odds with my own daughter. But I felt like I needed to stand up for myself, to set a boundary. I didn't know what the future held for me and Ella, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was making a decision that was right for me. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay.